Welcome to another episode of Unsourced Wall. My name is Elvis, and as always, I'm your host. Now, we have a lot to get through today, so let's try to make this nice and quick. Alright, first things first, let's start off with the big news, which is that in Marvel movie news, we have finally the first trailer for Dark Phoenix, which I know has been making the rounds. I think one of the Russian versions was leaked the other day, and then finally they decided to post it up from their new poster. I'll post the poster up right now, and it looks pretty good. At least the poster does. The trailer for a movie that is coming out in a hair over 4 months from now is pretty disappointing. The most that it does is reaffirm to the audience, to the viewership, that it's going to be redoing the Dark Phoenix storyline that they already did in The Last Stand, which is fine. It's fine first trailer, but not fine for a first trailer for a movie that's coming out so soon. If this was a year ago and we were trying to get things rolling after they had finished preliminary shooting, then yeah, I understand. Small, sparse trailer, atmospheric, character shots, some narration, that makes sense. But for a movie that's coming out like February, it's coming out on Valentine's Day, that doesn't inspire a lot of confidence. It does bring up that idea that I keep talking about how Disney just sort of seems like they're going to be brushing off the X-Men movies once they get them and once everything's finalized because they want to do their own little relaunch and reboot. That's what it feels like because this trailer is a kind of a big load of nothing, especially after so long and a lot of reshoots. And like I said, European press expos and cons have been getting footage for at least twice, 3 times in a row now. We should expect more. But like I said, overall, it doesn't look bad because there's not much to really go in about. We shouldn't be at the point of teaser trailing right now. You should be really trying to focus in on getting people excited, showing what you can, and really trying to garner interest in this movie. It's the next to last movie in the X-Men franchise that Fox is doing. There's only the New Mutants after this, and who knows if that's even going to come out. So you really want to hit hard here, and they're not really. It feels like a whimper. Well, this is just breaking news, but it seems that Dark Phoenix has been delayed until June, so that makes pretty much all that I said about Dark Phoenix's trailer sort of null and void, which kind of sucks because I was talking about that and that's my whole crux of it. Still, for a teaser trailer, I guess it has somewhat of a reprieve. There's still more time to do marketing on this, but I still can't see it as anything else other than sort of just very lame duckingly brushing off. I don't know if 4 months is going to be enough to really do more and try and get this thing some heat, some traction, some buzz. At least atmospherically and shot-wise, it looks pretty okay. And there's not really any hints that it's going to be this 1,000 subplot clusterfuck that The Last Stand was. I know that a lot of criticisms about the trailer have only been centering in on this common complaint about it looks exactly like The Last Stand. And no, it really doesn't. If you need to rewatch The Last Stand to understand that these things couldn't be any more different, then go ahead. But The Last Stand was just this incredible, unfocused, and really, really muddy mess of a film. You had the Mutant Civil War, the Brotherhood Civil War, the Cure storyline, the Dark Phoenix storyline, Iceman, Rogue, and Shadowcat, and some sort of love triangle. It was a complete mess. Felt like they were just throwing everything in the kitchen sink in there. It would make Amazing Spider-Man 2 blush with how uncoordinated it was. Yeah, no, it looks far better than that, but right now there's not really much to it other than looks. We don't really have any substance yet, and that's really what we need. In terms of other Marvel movie news, we have yet another update, in quotes, on the Gambit movie that is probably never ever going to come out because it's been in pre-production and development hell for, I think longer than most kindergartners have been alive. And this update is pretty facile. It just says that their new tact for the movie is going to be in the mold of a romantic comedy. And I don't really understand that. I mean, it sounds good, but they've been saying heist film, sort of a crime comedy kind of film, and now romantic comedy. It just seems like someone out there is just doing all these rewrites and script treatments to try and get something to stick, and it's not working, and someone's really trying to make this work. It feels like a very desperate move to try and get people still talking about it in the public and not let it fade away. In terms of DC movie news, we have some interesting stuff that does connect to what I was talking about last week, which is that Huntress and Black Canary have been cast. No word on Renee Montoya though. But I am pretty glad to say that Mary Elizabeth Winstead has been cast as Huntress, and Journey Smollett Bell has been cast as Black Canary for Margot Robbie's Birds of Prey movie. So that's going to be interesting. I think they're both fine actresses, and I really can't wait to see how everything starts shaping up around them because it seems like it's going to be a hell of a time. And for the last bit of movie news, the Hellboy reboot starring David Harbour has been pushed back 3 months, which I think makes a lot more sense than its original release date, because if you've been tracking and following the production schedule of this, it did seem a lot rushed, and 3 months more seems like a good amount of time without feeling like they're unconfident about it. The only real thing we've ever seen about it was David Harbour in the full Hellboy makeup, and he still seems perfect for the part. I just did a reread of the series a while back, and I think that he does seem like he's gonna do and bring a lot to the role. Moving on to TV show news, we have both a new poster for Titans, which I'm going to put up right now, and some character-focused clips showcasing Beast Boy's transformative abilities and also his green skin, Raven doing some demon stuff, a new look at the sci-fi angle of Starfire's character, which has been kind of underexplored. Most of the trailers and clips so far showcasing her being experimented on in some sort of government lab, and also Robin again. And I have to admit that none of this is going to really sway people who are already against the show. I think it all looks pretty good. It looks pretty well developed and produced, especially the Beast Boy stuff, which has a little jingle, his own personalized jingle in the background of it, and it's pretty nice. It has a good mood. I think that Beast Boy, of all the characters I've seen so far in these clips, seems pretty enjoyable. I'm not altogether excited about the show, but I'm willing to give it a chance, and I think that's a lot more than people are willing right now to give it, but that's perfectly fine. We don't really know much about it yet outside of what they're showing, and what they're showing is very polarizing, to say the least. So I'm not downplaying that reaction one bit. And another interesting bit of DC TV news is that the upcoming CW-wide DC show crossover that they do every year has been announced to have cast the character of the Monitor, and have no doubt that this is going to be a horrible adaptation and horrible use of the character, but it's nice to see that at least someone's going to be able to portray it. The actor in question is LaMonica Garrett, and overall, I don't really see how they could mess up the Monitor, but the CW has been able to go above and beyond in really making horrible TV shows and decisions, so I have no doubt they're going to live up to my really horrified expectations. Skipping ahead to something else, we have Amazon Prime's first poster and actual look at their adaptation of Garth Ennis's The Boys, with a preview poster, which I'll post up again, that emulates the first cover of the first issue, with the cast of characters kind of looking down and somewhat expressionizing and being kind of smug at the reader, who has presumably just been on the receiving end of one of their ass kicking. Astute observers and comic fans will note that while some characters like the Frenchman, the Female, and Mother's Milk look pretty spot on, Butcher and Wee Huey, played by Carl Urban and Jack Quaid respectively, are honestly quite different appearance-wise than they were in the comic. With Wee Huey, you can understand that because visually he was much more similar to Simon Pegg, who was attached to a film adaptation at one point, but has said that he has grown out of the role age-wise, which I think is completely understandable. So having a new actor, even if they don't look like the character, makes more sense because that is so imbued with like Simon Pegginess. And we have, of course, Carl Urban as Billy Butcher, who somehow looks exactly like Andy Serkis. I don't see why he couldn't look like Billy Butcher, because I think he looks like him without the beard, but the beard is fine. I don't mind it, and I think that Carl Urban has more than enough proof that he can handle that kind of role, and I can't wait. I really can. It looks pretty good. Although my main point of contention is that it's by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, and they did some horrible stuff with the Preacher show. I mean, they were able to translate some stuff later on, but it's such a long, boring slog 90% of the time. Whether or not there'll be more hands-on here, or whether or not there'll be more hands-off, I don't know. I just hope that whatever the case, they're able to bring at least some of the hearty semblance of the comic and not just kind of do whatever they wanted like they did with Preacher to its detriment. Now, we have also just started our fall comic book show premiere explosion with the premiere of The Gifted this week, which I'll be talking about after what I read this week, so stay tuned for that. And now, in terms of comic book news, it's time to get a little bit more of an unfortunate news piece, which is the sad and incredibly too soon passing of Norm Brayfogle, who is one of the defining and most iconic comic artists of the modern age, at least. At the very least, his influence and his candor and the reach he has had with other artists and in helping along their careers and inspiring them can't be understated. As most may know, he had an unmistakable impact on the Batman line of comic books, introducing characters like Jeremiah Arkham, Amygdala, the Ventriloquist, and providing art for so many iconic storylines with them, moments, mood, covers, Elseworlds. His mark on Batman cannot be and should not be ever forgotten, because it is something that we are still seeing to this day and has never left the character. We have also had his artwork on even favorite comics of mine, such as American Flag or the Trinity of Sin, the Phantom Stranger series from 1952. And he leaves behind such a great breadth and library century of work. So to hear his passing is truly, truly saddening. And again, as we've seen with so many other passings that have only come so recently, we see artists and comic writers and people in the industry giving their outpouring of support for Norm and his family and all that they have, their anecdotes and their emotional connections with him and relationships with him, which is always heartening. And I am truly hoping that his family and everyone who was close to him really do come through this with the knowledge that he touched so many lives and that they go through this period of mourning intact and well and in safe and healthy hands. So rest in peace, Norm, and hope you're somewhere better now. Anyway, let's move on into what I read this week. Starting off with a big one, the big event of 2018 for DC. And no, I'm not talking about Doomsday Clock. I'm talking about Heroes in Crisis, written by new Golden Boy Tom King with art by Clay Mann, which was the premier selling point of this event. Every time you would hear news about it from Tom King or DC, be like, look at this new Clay Mann page. Isn't it beautiful? Clay Mann's really hitting out of the park with this page, this art, look at this panel, look at this character, look at this pose. And that makes a lot more sense because Clay Mann is the only reason to even read this comic right now, because it's not really that good in any other sense. The art is probably the only draw because, well, Clay Mann is a good artist and the art is actually kind of beautiful. They weren't lying there, but I'm not going to say that this is as bad as Mr. Miracle, which I think is a truly horrible and terrible and awful book. No, that's not. That would be diminishing how bad Mr. Miracle really is. No, Heroes in Crisis is in itself just really boring and bland so far. Now I'm going to tell you what I didn't expect. All right. I didn't expect everything to be so face front. So that everything isn't face front isn't something I'm going to be complaining about because it's a mystery. You just want to set up what the mystery is, and that's what the comic does. So I'm not going to rail against that. You want to set the atmosphere, you want to set up the what, and you want to set up the who, as in who is at the center of the mystery. And this issue does that. But in terms of handling the impact of the mystery and the impact it has on the characters, it goes for way too many cliche moments and way too many kind of gimme set pieces to try and elicit in a very forced way some sort of emotion from the reader over some sort of really, really blunt and way too rapidly used catharsis. Give an example of that, we have one of the characters who was murdered. Spoilers, of course, everybody already knew this is a murder mystery. Named Hotspot, who I think was on a Teen Titans a long time ago. And one of the pages we see of him is a confessional which littered the book. Him saying, only thing I want in my life is people to remember my catchphrase, I'm just warming up. And the next page is Superman finding his body and saying, oh my god, I can't remember his catchphrase. What was it? And it might be like this really heartbreaking moment, but it happens way too fucking fast. You want to pay that off later. You want to have that emotive reaction because you remember it. Not like, oh, here what it is, and like now we're paying it off. You can't pay it off immediately after. There's no way for the reader to actually get emotionally invested in it. It's like War for the Planet of the Apes. It's something that did this recently that was just as bad at doing it. We have a character say or do something like this. Here's a token of my affection for you as a friend and as an emotional conduit between us. Next scene, character dies, and then the scene is paid off by the character giving it back to his dead corpse as they're sort of laying him to rest. There's not enough time for that to actually become a totem of their friendship to the audience. So it just falls flat, and that's how this does. It falls flat. You're trying way too hard to have the audience say like, oh my god, even Superman can't remember. This is such a heartbreaking thing. We just learned about it ourselves a second ago. There's no rhyme or reason for it other than to try and get the audience invested. Something that they really didn't put the time and effort in making worth investing in. So that's really my main point about this comic, is that it's just a lot of weird sort of cliches like that. Like the main impetus of the sort of chase aspect of the series, of the event, is that Booster Gold and Harley Quinn are the main suspects. The only reason they do that is because they see the people there and they see them all dead, like Flash and all these other characters dead, and they're like, oh, it must have been someone who was here, who was being treated here. And there's no evidence of that. It's just that Batman says it, so I guess it must be deduction. We don't really see deduction there. It could have been a lot of people, because like not like Sanctuary is a very well kept secret. They keep talking about it, especially Tom King's book. You have characters mention Sanctuary or the therapy place or super people. Harley Quinn was there of all things, so it's not like a very sort of bordered place. Any kind of villain could have gone in there and killed people. It doesn't mean that it's someone who is in treatment. It just feels like a very logical leap in order to get the story rolling. And with an issue that is nothing but setup is not really about the story so far yet. That could have been done and handled so much better. You had enough space to set that up and to make that at least sort of a logical idea that we can like say, oh wow, I wonder what the twist is if they're already making this good case for it. Which is what a good mystery should do. You should want to be like, how didn't this happen? Because the mystery is always in two parts. You get the answer to people who think they know what they know. And then the mystery is about unraveling that and seeing the clues about what actually did happen. That it's standard. It's well known, and Tom King doesn't pull that off. But like I said, the art is good, and it's the first issue, so I'm not going to be too hard on it, especially for a mystery. But as it goes along, I will be judging it accordingly to whether or not it handles any kind of subsequent events in any kind of good way. Overall, it's mediocre, it's bland, kind of boring, but I don't know. It could turn out to be good if he handles it better. At least Mitch Gerads is not on the art, so I don't have to like try and cover my eyes from the awful no talentness of it. Moving ahead, we have Doomsday Clock number 7, the first issue of the second half of this maxi series, and I have to say I am through with giving this series the benefit of the doubt because this was an awful issue. And I know that I've been more on this series side, but that was because there's always some sort of nugget or this really kind of emotional tether that I could get invested in. Or at least I could see the reasoning behind that and see like, okay, this is not working all that well, but it's trying and I appreciate the effort because there's actual effort there. This issue though is devoid of all of that. It is nothing but really mushed up, jumbled, and borderline incoherent sort of expository nonsense. Like none of it really makes any sense. I mean, it makes sense because they're explaining it, that this is it. This is how it is. But it just doesn't come across all that well because it just feels so rushed, so overstuffed, and you don't really get a handle on anything. Okay, I guess that's what that is. I guess this is why Dr. Manhattan's doing what he's doing. I guess this is the explanation for why anyone is doing what they're doing. But it's hard to really care because it feels so dragged out. Because instead of moving the story forward, it's all about sort of going back and then saying, okay, no, this is how it went. And so you're just kind of stuck in the mud. You feel like you're regressing rather than in the second half of a series that really should be picking up speed. So it's really boring. It's even more boring than Heroes in Crisis was, because while Heroes in Crisis was at least devoid of any kind of story progression, it had at least big response of nothing so you can breathe it in a bit more. This is just like rapid fire, this, that. And at the end of it, you just felt like, okay, this was a waste of an issue, because at 6 issues, the first 6 issues were really kind of sparse. You could have littered that across those and used your issue management space a lot better than you have right now, and it just feels like a waste of time. And it really does cast a shadow over the rest of the series. We have 5 issues left, and well, it felt like Jeff Johns does not know what he wants to do or what he's doing. And people will say that that's how it's always felt, but now more than ever, it feels like there's just no way that this is going to read well. It feels almost Mr. Miracle-esque in that sense, where you don't think that if you get it all in one place, that it's going to make any kind of sense. It's a shame. It really is a shame. And just for laughs, let's move on into Justice League Odyssey number 1, the unfortunate series that has been redrawn, pushed back like several times at this point. And I have to say that it's kind of a shame because the issue itself is, I guess, okay. It's not like fantastic, and it's not horrible either. It's just borderline readable. Okay, I guess if you're into this kind of story, into this kind of cosmic story that has some sort of hinges and tinges of time travel shenanigans, then, you know, that's good. I just think that given everything that's really been plaguing this book, it came out relatively unscathed. I know there are some issues with Vril and the character and having to introduce all these other things that I guess were excised by editorial mandate, but you wouldn't be able to tell that just by reading it. Cedric, the artist, is off the series after 2 issues. I think he's meant to be on there for at least 4 or 5 before he had to redraw some stuff, and he ran out of time before having to go back and work on his creator own stuff. So, I mean, his work is good. I don't think that anything is going to top his DC work in terms of his Aquaman stuff, because that was like fucking beautiful. But it's fine here. He has a definite flair and style, and that carries over, even though it's a bit scratchy here and there, a bit wonky editing wise. So I'm not going to be too critical of that. But overall, it's not the worst thing by Williamson I read, and I'm not a big fan of Williamson's DC work. It just seems pretty typical fare, and it seems like a decent start to a story. So by default, it's the best DC comic I read this week, which I guess is congrats to Williamson. Yay. Alright, let's move on to The Wicked and the Divine Special 1373. pretty good issue. And I think that, like I said, the story has never been, for me at least, about the characters as they are, but more the general scope of the plot. And so that's why I really like these incarnation specials they've been doing throughout the series, because it does give the story a lot more shape and fulfillment, which I don't really usually like to say about stuff like this, because I think that it does take away from the main core thing. But I think the main core here is more thematic and more about the impact of the universe and how it works. And so if that's where the center and the focus lies, and stuff like the tie-ins, which I wouldn't usually try and praise as much, or at least try to hone in on this much, mean a lot more. They have a lot more currency, a lot more weight to the reader. So it did have a lot of pathos, and I really did engage for a lot. It's probably one of my favorites of the incarnation specials they've been doing. It's because it had a lot of emotional resonance, and the art was fantastic as well. I am so kind of two minds that this series is going to be ending soon, because I'm going to miss it. It wasn't the best all the time, but it really did have a lot of stuff that I truly enjoy about reading a story and being able to be enveloped by a story. I know that it wasn't the favorites of a lot of people, and I respect that, but it really did fulfill a niche for me at least. So 2 thumbs up. Now, before we leave, I want to give some rounds to things I missed last week, which was Jeepers Creepers number 5 by Mark and Draco, which was the finale of the miniseries. And after reading it, I have to say, I think that this was canceled. I think that that was the reason why it never said it was a mini before. I think that it was totally cut short, because that's how this feels. It feels like a very rushed ending, because there are things that were set up that are never paid off. And there are things that were meant to be important, or that were seemingly important, that are never brought up again, never come full circle. And I know that's like typical slash movie stuff, you know, like you want to give this false lead. When you're reading a story like this, it just seems like it never existed, especially out of context stuff. They were just never expanded upon at all. I mean, it's a good ending. I like the impact of the ending. It's, like I said, it's a horror comic, and I think that the ending at least had some really unsettling energy and imagery to it. I'm all for that there. But for this series, it feels like they just kind of cut and ran, which is a shame, because I was enjoying it. I thought they could have done so much more, and it feels like they let that potential go to waste. So honestly, I enjoyed the series, but it does fumble a little bit, and that's a shame. That's a real shame. It doesn't fumble too much, but I don't think I can readily recommend it unless you're interested in the series and the franchise, and you want to get at least one more adventure or one more story out of it, because there's no way there's going to be a 4th movie. So this is probably going to fulfill at least a little bit of that appetite for it. And I think lastly, at least, is Kick-Ass number 7. Now, like I said, I wasn't originally planning on reading it because it doesn't have Mark Millar and doesn't have John Romita Jr., so I just didn't see the point, because I think that even though they don't always get it quite right, there's a tempo and there's a beat to their art and to their writing together that does make Kick-Ass what it is. And it's really hard to replicate, and it's really easy to get wrong. And I'm just tired of seeing that happen all the time. Fortunately, though, Steve Niles and Marco Fruzen, they're able to bypass that quite readily, and mainly it's because they're not trying to ape Millar and John Romita Jr. That's not to say that they're taking Kick-Ass and they're changing it into something else, that they're disregarding the energy, the atmosphere, and the tone of the series. No, they're just writing it differently. They're writing it more as a standard kind of narrative with momentum and plot build-up and all that kind of stuff. Now, that sounds like, well, that's better than it originally was, but for me, the appeal of Kick-Ass was always that it was a mess of chaos and insanity that just would not stop. It was like this rolling ball effect. While Steve Niles and Marco Fruzen's, at least for now, is reading like a proper story narrative with unfolding events. And I enjoy that as well. I enjoy that as much. So I'm all for it. I don't know how this is going to work as a single arc, because like I said, Mark Millar is doing this whole rotating creative team thing. So I don't know how that's going to impact this arc in particular, because they're writing it as if it were just a regular arc in a series. Hopefully they'll be able to stick the landing and be self-sufficient. That's all I really want. I want arcs to be self-sufficient. But it's off to a good start, and I think that they have a good note on the new Kick-Ass, their new position as this really wayward crime boss, and I really think that it's a lot of fun. It doesn't have the same manic energy, but it's still as emotionally heavy when it wants to be. So fingers crossed. Oh, I didn't mention Mage the Hero Tonight number 12. Still good. I still enjoy it. There's not much to say. I think I'll have to wait on this series until it all wraps up, because it's really in that groove of this is the ending block, so it's taking its time a little bit. I don't begrudge it. It's just how it's always been for this series. So still good, and I think that Matt Wagner and his sons are stellar. So I can't wait for what is promising to be quite exciting final issues. Now, let's move on into what I watched this week, which is the season premiere of The Gifted. Wow, I can't believe it's been this long since I had a TV section, but let's hope I haven't gotten rusty. Overall, I have to say, it was quite good. Now, it's the flip side, it's the other side of the coin of the Fox X-Men TV shows, the other one being Legion. And I do like that they've been able to really make them distinct counterparts. While Legion is all about themes and big ideas and large high concept things and atmosphere and energy, The Gifted, while not on a pay network but local television, they've really focused in on drama, character work, and a lot of the more sort of pseudo blockbustery affectations. And it's worked. It really has worked for them, for either show, honestly. And The Gifted season 1, I enjoyed it. It was a nice kind of slow show in a good way because it took its time with the characters and building up the arc of the season, the tension, the risks, the dangers, and this season premiere seems to be following right along in that footsteps. I really enjoy these characters and the inter-character tension and drama that they have. You have, say, Polaris and everything surrounding her baby, and this kind of pseudo new Fenris between the Strucker siblings. It's all really cathartic and it hits home and it's very heartening. It's all really great stuff. Although something that did happen in season 1 is that I did fall off it like 2/3 of the way through that season, because it didn't keep a momentum, and I went back and I binged it later on. And hopefully that won't happen with this season. These were relatively short seasons none the least, and it still sort of felt kind of dragging near the end. The second season, I hope they're able to keep their head above water a bit more, because all that's well and good, but it does need a little bit more of an amped attitude to it. There were some subplots in the first season, like with Blink and I think Warpap's brother or something like that, I forget his name, that really did drag the show down because they weren't quite interesting. The actors did a good job, the writing wasn't so bad, but it did detract from and feel like filler from everything else that was going on. So far this episode, there's a little bit of that with like what's going on with the Hellfire Club and Reva and the Cuckoos that just isn't very engaging, but hopefully, yeah, they're able to balance it out a bit more, because I think it still has good bones, it's still very interesting, it's got a lot of excitement and a lot of emotional resonance. And in terms of bringing back and starting off this new season of comic book shows, there's not much better you can do about that. 2 thumbs up. And now let's move on into listener questions. We have one question today from Makai Knight Aki at AkiCat on Twitter. And their question is, what do you think the big two can do to make comic books more accessible and compete with other forms of entertainment? And honestly, that is a tough question because there's so many things that go into that. And people will have different perceptions and ideas and how they get their entertainment and what they like about how they get entertainment, and trying to impose that on, how comic books release. There's not really just one fell thing that you can impose, think like, okay, this is really what's going to make the difference. I think that like with stuff with Marvel Unlimited and hopefully the DC Universe app, we're going to be seeing a lot more things being put up, a lot more series, a lot more creators going in and making the move to like a digital platforming service. I'm not saying something like DC Universe right now is very faulty, because you have like maybe one issue of one run and then saying catalog will be available for purchase in October, which just doesn't sound good. It sounds like kind of a rip because you're already paying for a service, so you have to pay again. Really doesn't engender any kind of goodwill. But Marvel Unlimited, while they have like a large wait period, you do get like a huge amount of runs and extensive catalog and backlog. And I think that's something that we could see. Obviously, there is not so much in terms of printing costs. So what about, I don't know, having a minuscule backlog, but you pay like a fraction for the issue, and that fraction is included into a proposed monthly or yearly subscription fee, so that it all kind of accumulates, because it's not something that you can physically hold, and it's not like something that is expensed toward them as well, because it's not being printed, because you're not putting the same amount of physical resources into it, at least the output. That's not something that I think would work wholesale, but I think it's an interesting idea. My main concern would be trying to move toward digital. It's lax to say more accessible, and there are a lot of people that say like nothing can really beat the physical and tangible tactile sensation of reading a comic or reading a book, anything like that. When you move toward like ebooks or e-comic, it's still something that you don't really have to go out of the way to do, and I think that appeals to a lot of people. You don't have to go out of your way, you don't have to go to the rigmarole of collecting and getting all this stuff, and that piles up. It really does pile up. I've done my fair share collecting, and while I I really enjoy having the physical issues of some of my favorite comics ever in my possession. The widespread appeal of that kind of lessens if you're trying like, oh, here, buy every single issue of Red Hood and the Outlaws, or buy every single issues of Teen Titans, like new runs of it. It's kind of an upsell when you're going to be left like, or trying to, if it's a good comic, you'll be left like dozens of issues and nowhere to put it. Like, does it really seem worth it? So digital, I think, is the way to go. But how to handle that? Definitely not like DC Universe's app is doing, and not quite like what Marvel Unlimited is doing, and who knows the ramifications of that. Overall, thanks for that question, Aki Cap. Like I said, it's so wide and it's so varied and so many things go into it. But like, I don't think there's anything right now, at least in terms of content. I think we're seeing a lot more variance in content and publishers. Like Ahoy Comics is coming out, so that's a new publisher that's coming out, and they have really good works so far. So I think we're seeing a widespread amount of that. But in terms of access, yeah, digital, getting things at ease. Anyway, thank you, and I hope I was able to answer your question to your satisfaction. As always, I am so grateful and I am so thankful for anyone who sends in their questions, because it means so much to me that anyone even would, and I am just so honored to be able to answer them and hopefully give my own thoughts about them. If you have your own questions, thoughts, or comments, you can always tweet them at me at my Twitter account at THE_SNICKMAN, or comment below anytime. I would also like to give a shout out to the cover artist at DOTEMCEE. Forever grateful for this amazing piece of work. It's so fantastic. And well, next week starts October, so I have this whole thing cooked up where I'm going to be talking about a different horror movie based on a comic each week, and I'm going to be posting a poll with my 3 suggestions and an audience suggestion spot that will be used to really sort of see which ones I talk about for the 4 weeks of October. So if you want to get on that, please check me out on Twitter and let's get your votes in. Alright, so thank you for listening and see you all next week.